One, two. Okay. Okay, now it's good. My audio disappeared. It was a weekend of gloom and doom, at least for a little while. Well, I'm sorry, for most of the weekend. And spring actually goes into hiding this week for several days as some rather cold air comes into the east. We've still got some severe weather and flash flooding going on in parts of the Gulf states and into the southeast tonight and for Monday. That's that where there's that and more on the agenda tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Which, if you'd like to support, just do your Amazon shopping via our referral link at the top of the chat board or on the description of this podcast. Because when you do, you keep the ads free. There's no ads during the show. So it's very easy. Just click on the link, buy whatever it is you're going to buy. Amazon throws us back a little bit of coin, doesn't cost you a penny, and we appreciate it very much. Those of you who have used our Amazon referral link to do your apocalypse shopping. I'm sorry, I just got thrown off a little bit. Somehow, I guess I must have downloaded some sort of update because I suddenly discovered my audio was turned off. So anyway, I fixed it, and I think you're working okay. Yeah, you know what, Joe? That doesn't work because when you breathe, I get levels. Okay.
Oh dear. Well, we're back.
I was 87 here yesterday. I am 50,
87.
87 with sunshine. Really, it was a great day. And of course, today it was gloom and doom here too, with a northeast wind, rain all day, and temperatures that didn't get out of the 50s. So that was
Wow.
fun.
Well, hey, it could be worse. You could be living in some place like Memphis, Tennessee, or someplace where it's life-threatening. In fact, I saw just a few moments ago from WPC a statement about life-threatening flooding conditions for places down in the deep south. It's the words just escape me. I
Well, when you get 4 days of severe weather, of severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, and torrential downpours in virtually the same places. It really was a monumental setup. We were talking about this early last week with that south southwest flow coming out of the Pacific and basically nothing moving. Uh, every wave that formed on that front uh, didn't move. If I didn't move the frontal boundary, finally the last wave, which is the one that formed late yesterday and last night, has progressed everything further to the east. And now I'm in it here, and we actually have severe weather. There's tornado watch up well to the south of me because I'm not even. I couldn't even get. I got to 87 yesterday. I'm not even in the warm sector today.
well, at least you got into the warm sector. Here, we had been promoting that Saturday would be a gloom and doom day, as you mentioned, with chilly temperatures, but at least we would warm up today for Sunday. But we never did warm up.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
it
you didn't get
stayed.
much rain today either because the radar this morning when I woke up about 6 o'clock this morning was actually fairly loaded. But all the models had that all drying up as it moved southeastward, and now you're just going to wait for what comes up from the south, and that might give you a few hours of rain late tonight into tomorrow morning, and then after that, it's going to be cold through Wednesday.
It's going to be cold, and the S word entered the picture for some forecasts. I'm not talking about a substantial or significant. Actually, if you want significant snow, enough snow to shovel, early this week, you may want to head up to, let's say, the Adirondacks or northern sections of New England where they're going to get some snow. But down here, we may actually see some snow flurries or flakes of wet snow mixing in with raindrops as a result of this sharp cold front that's going to move on through on Tuesday. Not only will we get the cold, but we're also going to get the wind, and that'll make it feel all the more colder, Joe.
Yes, definitely. And then at the end of the week, looks like we've got another weather front dropping with a low southeast from Canada for later Thursday and Friday, and then some kind of wave is going to develop on that front, probably in the southern Appalachians or along the southeast coast and kind of just shoot northward with some rain in the mid-Atlantic and for you, I think in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England for uh, later Friday into early Saturday of next weekend. But if it's timed okay, maybe things will get better after that.
It almost looks like, excuse me, the system for the end of the week almost looks like an Alberta Clipper. I mean, it's moving in on Wednesday. It's somewhere over Nebraska. By the time we get to Thursday, it's south of Chicago. And the problem with this, Joe, is that there's going to be a ridge of high pressure that's going to be pushing up against that advancing low and trying to block it. So by the time it gets to we get to Friday, the system is somewhere over Pennsylvania and not making any real advance after that. And that unfortunately means that it could be another dreary weekend coming up next weekend. At least that's how it looks from this particular vantage point.
Well, the other good piece of news we should mention is we were talking about this, everything that went on in the lower Ohio Valley, the Mississippi River, the middle and lower Mississippi River Valley, and now in parts of the deep South. Although today's rain is really a 1 day affair. Places in Alabama, Georgia, uh, and South Carolina not didn't get any. We didn't get any rain here last 4 days, but those other areas had severe conditions for the last 4 days. This week is going to be quiet for the most part, other than tomorrow in southern Georgia, northern Florida, and South Carolina, and maybe into parts of coastal North Carolina. The rest of this week should be really quiet as far as severe weather goes.
Well, you know, the one thing that really was an eye opener for me when I was watching some of the evening newscasts tonight was the fact that, you know, there were homes that were actually pushed off their foundations. And I said to Renata, I said, is that possible? I mean, you know, I can understand if we had a hurricane or maybe a tornado, but is that, and she pointed out, said, water when it's at its worst can do just such a job, and that's what some people in places like Arkansas, for example, are finding out. Sadly, very quickly, that is the equivalent of a situation where you find yourself without a home or an unlivable situation. It's crazy. It
Yeah.
just, and I'm saying to myself too, they keep promoting this as a once in generation system, but you know, I don't know about you, Joe, but I think over the years we've
We've
seen
seen this.
similar
We've seen
scenarios.
this show before.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
generations are getting shorter and shorter, I suppose. Anyway, welcome to everybody tonight on the chat board. Hope you had a great weekend. Same goes for those of you who aren't on the chat board but are lurking in the background tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We are here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. And of course, the occasional Friday and Saturday, if there's stormy conditions around in the Northeast or maybe even here in the Southeast, we'll throw in an extra show here and there and let you know about it. And you can know about it too if you turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. And of course, if you like the show, please hit the like button. Joe is so anxious to ring the bell when we get to 100 likes. So, anyhow,
It's been a while
yeah,
since I've done that for 100 likes. We've been doing
correct.
it for Brill or Jeopardy, but it's been a while since we've had 100 likes in a show.
Well, they'll come back. All right, let's get started tonight as we take a look at the watches and warnings. And we do have flash flood warnings up for a good chunk of the state of Alabama and for about half of Georgia. You put it on the diagonal. You see some yellow in there in Georgia. There's a small tornado watch. When I say small, I mean a small geographic area of a tornado watch. And we also have some wind advisories up in the central part of North of South Carolina. We still have, even though the precipitation is almost over, or just about over with, we still have a number of that light green flood advisories because maybe the heavy torrential rains have stopped, but the waters are still rising in a lot of the rivers there, particularly the ones that drain down from the Ozarks. So they should be peaking in the next 24 hours or so in terms of flood stage. But with cold air coming down, you see there's frost advisories in the light blue. We've got also freeze warnings up from Missouri all the way down into parts of central Texas, and a few winter weather advisories on the upper peninsula of Michigan. And I guess this is the first day of out of the last five where the storm activity, when we look at it via the lightning strikes on the satellite loop, I mean, there are some going on in central Georgia inside that tornado watch area, but actually those strikes now have diminished. And there's another line that's down in cutting on a diagonal the southern part of Alabama to about Mobile, down to just southeast of New Orleans, and that's probably the back edge of all of this, and that's pushing to the east. But meanwhile, in the northeast, it's really more about clouds that continue to stream up from the southwest, and we're just going to have to wait for this whole thing to just sort of pivot eastward, and that's going to happen because if you look up in the northern Great Lakes, there's a upper air trough that's dropping southeastward that's going to act as the mechanism to push all of this out to the east.
And, that's one thing that unfortunately later in the week we're going to lack is as I mentioned a few moments ago, is progression, especially when we look toward Thursday, Friday. The fact that we have that ridge of high pressure just offshore is going to set the stage for a slowdown in weather systems. And sadly, that's going to translate for us into a long duration period of rain. I think we'll probably be getting into rain here Friday, and maybe it could last throughout much of next weekend, Saturday and on into Sunday as well.
Dry in the western lakes. You can see a lot of clear skies in the plains and in the Rockies. There's some energy coming in off the Pacific that's going into the west, bringing a little bit of precip there, actually more than just a little bit, from Northern California up the coast into Oregon and Washington. And then you have the stuff in the east. Much of what you see in Kentucky and Tennessee, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, that's all light stuff. And some patches into Virginia. The heavy stuff is in western South Carolina, down here into the northern half of Georgia. And you see there's actually one severe thunderstorm warning box that is up at the moment. The severe weather kind of underwhelmed a bit today in terms of what was forecast earlier. It wasn't forecast to be a big outlook, a big breakout. They only had a outbreak. They only had slight risk. SPC did, but there were some scattered heavy thunderstorms heavier thunderstorms in Georgia anyway. There's still again a little bit of activity down in southern Alabama, but even here too on the line that you see that runs down to the coast and into southeastern Louisiana. There are some stronger cells in the mix, but it's not the most. It's not an impressive area, and we're coming into sunset now, so the daytime heating factor will go away. So again, all of this needs to sort of translate eastward as we go into the overnight. The Storm Prediction Center. You see the storm reports today so far, and no tornadoes. 15 reports of wind and no reports of hail, so a total of only 15 reports. That's the fewest we've seen in well over a week. And the forecast for the remainder of tonight, the slight risk area remains and is shrinking, and a little finger of marginal risk that goes up into southern Virginia. That northern area is going to fire up a bit during the overnight. And then for tomorrow, SPC has a slight risk for parts of South Carolina, southeast Georgia down to the Florida Panhandle. Well, not the western part of the westernmost part of the Florida Panhandle, but let's call it northern Florida, with a marginal risk slightly further south. And there's a 2 to 5% tornado risk there. On day three, we have a tiny area of marginal risk in southern Florida, and that's it. And for the rest of the week, for 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, SPC has predictability too low, uh, which means that, well, there could be some severe weather, but we don't have enough confidence yet to put out any kind of a forecast.
And I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I mean, and on the chat board, Christianopedia noting that Hoping we can have a look at next weekend. Well, I think you already know from my comments over the last couple of minutes about next weekend. But she says we have the Dirt Cheap Sale, looking at 350 customers both Saturday and Sunday if it's nice or no rain. And
And this is where, Christinipedia, where is this sale?
I
Just
was assuming it's somewhere in the tri-state or
well, I'm guessing it's where she works, which I think is Ace Hardware. I thought so. At Ace Hardware in Rocky Point. I mean,
well,
we're always happy to give for free advertisements to our regular,
yes.
uh, you know, players here on the chat board.
Well, I mean,
But
if it's Ace Hardware and they're not doing anything outside, if it's inside, I mean, I don't see what the difference would be. But
yeah,
but
well,
and she
depending on how
has
this
got.
plays out, I think it's possible that there might be some improvement over the weekend. But we'll
We
see.
would hope so. We don't want anybody to get hurt by this potential spell of unsettled conditions. But we do want to alert you right now that things are going to be going downhill. It would appear toward the end of the weekend
Right.
and next weekend. So, and
Moderate
yeah,
risk of
Rich
flash
Mansky,
flooding. I'm sorry,
Rich
what, Joe?
Rodmansky said that Rich Rodmansky said Ace is the place.
Right. For your helpful hardware needs. Um, Moderate risk of flash flooding in southern Alabama to a small portion of southwest Georgia. You got the marginal risk pushing up into Virginia. And the WPC tomorrow has a marginal risk from southeast Virginia down into northern Florida. The dynamics now are nothing like they were
No,
over prior days.
no.
The worst of it is over with.
I mean, we don't see
And
any slight, we don't see any enhanced, we don't see any moderate, we don't see any high in terms of convection, in terms of thunderstorm activity. This is, as you just stressed, Joe, it's nothing like what we had a few days or a week ago, but still, there's some activity that we take note of, and we're taking note of it right now here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
so if you look at the upper air on the models tonight, we've got the European here. You can see the deep trough here in the eastern part of the United States. Actually, if we widen this out to the North America view, which I think would be a good thing to do, you can pretty much figure out that when you have your upper air winds coming down, even this time of year, when they're coming down from the Arctic and going down all the way into the southeast, that this is indeed a very cold flow, and you've got a strong ridge building up through the Rockies and into more like west central Canada rather than western Canada, because we've got troughing that's from Alaska down to the Pacific Northwest. So that's your feed for cold air. And this is on this particular shot, we are looking at um, uh, late Monday night, early Tuesday morning. And then eventually the trough just kind of the upper low just sort of rotates, doesn't, part of it pulls out, and then you got another short wave that drops down into the east at the end of the week, which is the reason why we're going to have some issues here. And if this upper air is correct, I would probably think that maybe Friday and Saturday don't look good. And it's, maybe we can get some improvement come Sunday, but it's all going to depend on how the surface, winds up setting up. And in the meanwhile, as we go, once that goes out, we still have we still have troughs coming down from Canada in the long range right until through the 20th of the month. So it's not as if we're going to go from what we're going into when it relaxes. It's not as if we're going to go into any kind of warm pattern that has any last sustained where it could be sustained for more than a day, a warm up for a day or so, because the flow from Canada is just too busy. So if you're looking for a string of warm days with temperatures in the 70s and 80s, ain't happening. Not in
It
this
didn't
pattern.
happen. CPC was hit it right on the nose. If you remember, about a week or even 10 days ago, I had made a comment that, according to them, the Climate Prediction Center, that the first half of April would be below normal temperature wise for most areas east of the Mississippi. And it's looked like that is going to be coming true all too true. Um, and you'll be reminded of that, especially so after that frontal passage on Tuesday. And again, I don't mind below normal temperatures, but the thing that's going to get me, and a lot of people have, agreed with me, is that this is one of the windier late winters and early springs that we have seen in recent years. It seems like the wind has been unrelenting, and we're going to have another round of gusty, strong winds here on Tuesday behind that frontal passage to go along with those unseasonably chilly temperatures.
So here's our, our front came through this morning, and now we've got the bottom part of this with a wave that's moving northeastward. And you can see the European does push some rain through during the overnight hours, and then it's mostly done by mid-morning. But clouds might linger for a while. It's going to take a bit to get it out of the way because there's another little ripple that forms in North Carolina that sort of bulges the rain back northwestward. So even though if the rain doesn't bulge back, the clouds will wait. And then, of course, you can see this low with an upper trough over Lake Huron that moves eastward, and that comes in. That finally pushes the whole frontal boundary out in the southeast. You can see the models developing some strong thunderstorms from southeast Virginia down through southern Georgia tomorrow. And that finally moves offshore tomorrow night. And then we get this shot of colder air in the east for Tuesday into Wednesday. Tuesday night into Wednesday morning is going to be cold with temperatures in the mid 20s to low 30s. And then we have that next trough that we talked about with a low dropping southeastward. You see there's a 1014 low there in Minnesota on Thursday that drops down into Kentucky. That eventually pivots around in the Appalachians, and it does bring some rain here. There's like some showers late Thursday, nothing to write home about, and then some heavier rain that comes in for Friday night and for Saturday, and then depending on how the upper air behaves, maybe the bulk of the steady rain gets out, but we still might have some leftover rain or showers come next Sunday until the whole trough finally moves out to the east.
Yeah, well, what do you think, Joe? Do you think after this prolonged or protracted spell of chilly or unseasonably cold air stays with us for a while, that instead of going to a springtime temperature, we'll somewhere along the lines it's like gonna be like clicking a switch and boom, we'll be into summer.
Well, you know what? It's funny you mentioned that. In fact, let me see if I can bring this up because this was pretty interesting. I was tipped off to this yesterday by good friend of ours who will remain nameless. So let me see if I take a look. I'm going to take a look on Pivotal Weather and see how much of the long range I can see because the European, does comes out with its, long range every couple of days, the weeklies, and they go, pretty far out. And he's just, let's see if we can figure this out. Um, so let me put this on a loop, and this is going to take us. This is going to take us at least into the first 2 weeks of May. Okay, the European weeklies. So if we take a look at those, there we go. If you look at the European weekly, so this is the first one is Monday the 14th. So that's a week from tomorrow. And you
Right.
see what that has, trough in the east, ridge in the west. And then as we move along, we still have troughing in the east a week later. Now it kind of relaxes a little bit, but when you go into time, the longer you go into time, the flatter the long range upper airs are going to look. But we get into May, we still have generally a northwest flow in the east and some ridging in the west. So a little troughing in the east and ridging in the west. So if we're going to flip a switch, I don't think it's going to come in the next 6 weeks. And now I can't see this. I can't see beyond this. But the Oh, it has temperature anomalies. That'd be interesting to look at. So here's the below normal for this is Monday the 14th. Okay. So if we go a week later, this kind of normalizes, maybe a little bit above normal in the last week of April into the first week of May, and then you know, it trends back closer to normal with most of the above normal temperatures out in the west. So uh, it doesn't look like we're going to flip a switch anytime between now and let's say mid-May, other than brief, a day here, a couple of days there. As far as a sustained warm weather pattern, I'm going to say no.
Frank R on the chat board. Frank R on the chat board says, "Strange April. April may be colder than March, was above average here." And right, March was about 4 degrees above normal. Now take note of the fact January, February, and also December were below normal. In fact, it was the meteorological winter was the coldest in about 11 years here in the tri-state area. Then all of a sudden we bumped right up to well above normal, 4 degrees above normal in March, and you say to yourself, "Well, that was it." There was a passing fancy. The cold weather was here. Now warming up toward above normal temperatures for a while into the spring and so. And now we're stuck with this now. So
Yeah.
if we end up with below normal temperatures in April, that would make it 4 out of the last 5 months with below normal conditions. And you say that based upon the long term with the European, that this may even linger into May. So
Well,
it's
and I can't see them, but apparently the European also puts out like monthly forecast maps that go out, which I don't get. But I was told, and what was striking about it was the fact that the European almost always puts out above normal temperatures in the long range. It just does. That's
right.
where the bias is. But it actually shows below normal temperatures in the eastern United States right through the summer,
Wow.
which was it was kind of startling to see when I heard about it. I guess I didn't like I said I didn't see it, but I trust the person that very much that told me about this. Uh, but it was kind of startling to see the European do that because usually in the long range it's always warm, warm, warm. So to have it showing that, it must be seeing something that's making it do that. Now, of course, it's one thing to forecast, and it's another thing to have for it to happen. So we'll just have to see how the trends go in the next weeks and months. But you're right, though. 4 out of the 5 below normal months were December, January, February, and now April. So that would be 4 out of the last 5. If April, if it presents like this, yeah, it'll be 4 out of 5. The 4 out of the last 5 months being below normal, and I can't remember the last time we've seen something like that.
Right. We had that long stretch of above normal every month. It was above normal, above normal, above normal. But now things have flipped a bit. By the way, on the chat board also, Matthew Warmer and Warman, I would assume, Matthew, that you tuned in a little late. We did look at the SPC forecast, convective outlook, and beyond the 3-day outlook, predictability is
Too low.
so he's asking Joe, do you think that there'll be a chance of thunderstorms for the Friday and Saturday system in the Northeast? Now, if you look at it's a developing, possibly intensifying low pressure system, a coastal low maybe. We'll see. And sometimes the benchmark of such systems is a bit of convection, maybe some thunderstorm activity. But again, the predictability, as we just noted, is too low at this point to say. Maybe we'll have a better handle on that mid or late week. But right now, the best we can tell you is that it looks like it's going to be another spell of dull, dank, dreary for later this week.
Okay, Chuck Cardillo and Brandon Doherty are both super chat contributors tonight, hitting the tip jar. Brad says, "Love the new show you guys are on. The clip showing Bill clicking his garage. Yeah, Bill was doing his weathercast, and instead of taking the device to change the maps on the computer, he took his car keys and was using his
I'm
his
trying to use
fob.
that. Kind of use that to flick the change the maps. His car fob instead of the
Yes,
anything. That's
yes, that was pretty funny. And Chuck Cardillo, thank you for the kind words as always. Most appreciated. So we're gonna have a fun. We have a fun Briller Jeopardy tonight, Joe. You're gonna love this one.
okay.
Okay, and for those of you at the chat board, get ready to have some fun. The category is Saturday morning cartoons.
Oh my goodness.
Saturday morning cartoons. The first question, Joe, is in what episode of Bugs Bunny did Bugs first say, "What's up, Doc"?
Uh, you mean I have to actually have the title of the episode?
You have to name the title of the episode.
Oh, I can't do that. I mean,
Uh,
I, you know, there was at one point when Bugs was just getting started, where he actually had a laugh similar to Woody Woodpecker. Do you remember that?
mhm.
I don't know whether or not he said it then or shortly thereafter, but I don't really know. You obviously you have the answers in front of
I
you.
do.
And
I'll give you a hint. I'll give you the opposite of the answer. Okay.
uh-huh.
Um, the calm bald.
The Oh, so that's the opposite?
That's the opposite of the title. The calm bald.
Um the mad hair or Harry or I don't
Yeah, okay, okay. The blank hair, not the crazy hair, not the mad hair. No, Vince Croce,
angry
not the
hair. I don't
gas bag. Maggie P, not scary hair. Another word, the
Anybody
opposite. The what could
people
be
saying the
considered the
Mad
opposite of
Hatter?
calm. What?
The Mad No, that's not the Mad Hatter.
No.
Wild hair?
The wild hair. There you go. The
Wild hair.
wild hair. The Renata, Mrs. Rayo got it too. The wild
There you
hair.
go.
Okay. What was the name? Here's the next one. What was the name of the park ranger on Yogi Bear?
Was that Ranger Smith?
And you could ring the bell for yourself for Major Smith. Yes.
There you go.
Here's the next question. Snoopy had a brother. Okay, from Charlie Brown.
Yes.
Snoopy had a brother. What was the brother's name?
Well, he lived out in the desert. I'm going to leave it. I know what the answer is. I'll leave it to yeah. Rich Rodmansky got it. Spike,
No, not Spike.
not Spike.
Not Spike.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, he must have had another brother then.
Well, the answer I have is not Spike. Not Scrappy.
I don't know.
Not
I thought it was
Olaf.
Spike.
Patrick
I thought it was
Darcy.
Spike.
Um, Spike was the dog on Tom and Jerry,
No,
and not Droopy, and not Scruffy, and not Oatmeal. Um, how do I do this? Uh,
I
see,
have here, Joe. I I just went online and asked that question.
okay, is does I mean, I'm just going by I have no idea, what the answer is, but if you're seeing something that says it's Spike, then it's Spike.
All right. Well, Snoopy, the iconic beagle from Peanuts, has several siblings, with Spike being the most well known, along with Marbles,
Mhm.
Olaf, Andy, and Belle.
Okay, well, he had Spot here, so I guess,
Who?
Spot.
Oh
You know,
no,
see Spot run, run,
no, it's
run,
not.
run. All right, it's Spike then. Okay, gotcha. All right, what year did the Saturday morning cartoons stop on the three major networks?
Oh, I think it. Well. That's a good question. It had to happen sometime, I think, in the late '80s or early '90s, because after that, cartoons were, you know, were gone. All right. If I have to pick a year, I'll pick 1988.
Actually, Stink Floyd is closer, according to what Scott has. Stink Floyd is closer with 2004.
Hmm.
Um, Three Dots at 2012 is a little, that's a little late. Um, and Johnny Sack 77 said 2001. Patrick Darcy 2003. Just and Vincent Croce and Craig Carlberg. You know what? You're close enough. The answer I have is 2006. Of course, I can't remember anything going back that far, but so you know. Anyway, and I know you
Well,
know
you were
the
probably
answer.
like
I
you were
know you
probably
know you've got to know the answer to this one. Okay.
okay.
What was the first primetime animated series?
Flintstones, meet the
Meet the
Flint.
Flintstones. They're the modern Stone Age family
And I've said this
from
before, and
the
I'll say it
town
again.
of
The first
Bedrock. They're
the first year or two that the Flintstones were on, they were hysterical. They were funny. It was an adult. It was a cartoon tailored for the adults. But once Pebbles arrived, it became kind of a semi kiddie show. And in
yeah,
fact,
and then
you
they
may
put
remember that with the Ideal Toy Company, they actually
yes.
made Pebbles dolls and Pebble building blocks or whatever.
Right, and then we had Pebbles and Bam Bam cereal, and then we
Yeah.
yeah, and then they brought in Gazoo with the voice of Harvey Korman.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, yeah, it got to be a bit. It got to be a bit of a stretch, but
And it very, I mean, some funny lines that the average 7 or 8 year old wouldn't understand. Like for example, when Fred accidentally drank car polish instead of cactus cola, and
right.
Barney says, "Barney, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I'm poisoned." And Barney says, "Get a chamois."
Oh God, yes, Mark France Senior. Of course, they had special guest stars like Stony Curtis and Marg Rock,
Right.
and if um, they had Samantha from Bewitched.
Right.
They had Perry Masonry.
Right.
Who else did they have? Governor Stone. No, that was it?
Ed
No,
Sully Stone.
Ed Sully Stone. Yes.
Well, that's a really dumb-looking dummy.
Oh God,
Cary Granite.
Cary Granite. Yes, they were very good in coming up with
and the
those.
and the
Oh,
Bo
right,
and there
and
was
Gina Lollobrigida.
yeah, and the Bo Brummel Stones.
Right. Oh God. All right. Anyway, it's coming up on quarter after 8 Eastern time. I think we can.
I do have a sad piece of news. I found out about it just before we came on the air. You talk about kids shows and childhood legends. We lost a childhood legend apparently today. Jay North.
Oh, you know what? It's funny you mentioned that because I was scrolling on Facebook this afternoon and a picture of Jay North came up, but I didn't, I just kind of scrolled right by.
Yeah,
He,
he passed away at 73.
do you want to,
The
a funny story about Dennis the Menace? Well, it's like one of those, do 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 Twilight Zone things. So Joseph Kearns, right, who played Mr. Wilson,
right,
was replaced by Gail Gordon
right,
because I think it was in the third season that
right in the middle of the third season. Yeah,
Joseph Kearns died. He was only 56, and he died
right,
of a heart attack. And he died right after they finished taping an episode where Mr. Wilson is writing his will and leaves Dennis his gold. He's going to leave Dennis his gold watch.
wow.
So that was the last episode that Joseph Kearns did before he had his heart attack and died. Which is, You know, kind
I
of
read
weird.
somewhere that he in his final weeks, in his, like, the last 4 or 5 weeks of his life, he was on a Metrical diet. That's all he was consuming was Metrical. You remember that stuff with,
Yeah, I've heard of that stuff, but I didn't know that he was on that.
you know.
Well,
But anyway, I didn't
God
like
knows,
Gil
God
Gordon.
knows what
Gil,
was in it.
Gil Gordon to me was not a great Mr. Wilson. He was more like a benevolent
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yeah.
And, Joseph Kearns was the perfect Mr. Hey, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah. I I'm also getting, and I always liked the show was Hazel, and I'm getting clips on my Reels feed on Facebook of episodes of Hazel. 1 minute, 90-second clips,
Yeah.
and it's on one of the
Antenna
channels I got. I
TV.
forgot which one. Family Entertainment Television. I think Hazel's on every day between 10 and 11. And then also on at from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. in case I have one of those nights where I can't sleep. But
The curious thing about Hazel is in the very first season, the first episode, the very first Hazel was in color, but then for the rest of the season it was in black and white. They eventually went to color
right,
the following
they were
season, but
two. Right, they were two. The first two seasons I think were in black and white. Then they went to color.
yeah,
But Shirley Booth was just great. I mean, she just really embodied that character. You
yep.
know, she really did. And she's one of the few actors that he has an Oscar from Come Back Little Sheba in
Come by Sheba.
1950. I want to say 51. Um, she has an Oscar. She has a Tony, and she has a couple of Tonys because she did a lot of Broadway, and she won. I think she won the Emmy twice for Hazel,
Yeah,
and she might even have a Grammy in there somewhere. And also in one of the Christmas cartoon shows.
she plays
Uh,
Mrs. Claus.
right, she's
Yeah,
Mrs. Claus.
yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, anyway, enough of that. It's time to go. And we will see everybody tomorrow night at 7:35. There's going to be some slight schedule changes on one day this week, which is Wednesday. We may start at 8 o'clock on Wednesday, but we'll let you know about that tomorrow.
Okay.
So in the meantime, everybody have a great night and a safe night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.
Good night, folks.